All right. So, hello and welcome back to our show Beyond the Classroom with On Course Vantage. Today we have with us Mriganka Sharma, who's currently at Johns Hopkins University's Krieger School of Arts and Sciences as a double major in molecular and cellular biology and medicine science, and also and the humanities and the minor in the writing seminars. She's always been someone who's been so clear on what she wants to achieve, in a rare case where everything we discussed in our meetings was flawlessly executed with no follow ups. And in fact, she always went above and beyond. Her Common Up essay was titled actually Main Character Energy, and rightly so. She's bright, hilarious, always filled with the best memes and jokes, and takes command over every room and every conversation that she walks into. We're so excited to have you, Mriganka. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I haven't heard that much validation since I left high school. That was so nice.
Yeah, that's probably the last time since you spoke to me because I always
Yeah,
validate
for
you.
sure.
Yeah, so actually, for everyone who's listening, I of course know that you've been very decided on bio from the very start, but can you take
Mhm,
everyone through your journey of deciding on molecular and cellular biology as
mhm.
your major choice?
So I'm just to like reintroduce my majors and minors. I have two majors and a minor. I am majoring in molecular and cellular biology, which at Hopkins we call MolCell.
Hmm.
And my second major is a newer major at Hopkins, but it actually got super popular since it was introduced. It's called MSH, or Medicine, Science, and the Humanities. And I'm minoring in the writing seminars, which is basically just like their standard writing degree. It's a lot of creative writing, fiction, poetry, all of that. So for bio, I mean, while it sometimes feels like I was certain on bio from the beginning, I feel like it's very relative because for me, like the basic simple reasons that I like bio were that I enjoyed it in school and then I also started enjoying it outside of school. So when I was in the seventh or maybe the eighth grade, I was starting to explore the internet a bit more. And I got really obsessed with Khan Academy. And I have this, I think the physical manifestation of me figuring out that I wanted to do bio is I have this like small notebook, which I probably showed to you, where
Yeah.
like I was like, okay, I want to do something. I want to study beyond the eighth grade for now, and it can be anything. So I tried to do trig, and then I tried to do organic chemistry, and then I explored like a bunch of subjects, and it's like 5 to 7 pages, and then I was like, okay, this isn't working. And then when I got to bio, and then cell division, and all the cool stuff, then it was just pages and pages and pages, and I figured out that this is the thing that is sparking joy. um,
Yeah.
and it's something that I'm enjoying, and I kept enjoying it inside of school as well. So on the more practical side, I knew that I wanted to do something which was related to science because it fascinated me. And I was decently good at science and pretty good at bio, which kept motivating me to keep trying to do more. So that was like a good positive reinforcement, I guess. But to be very honest, I don't even feel like a STEM major at Hopkins. I always joke that I'm like a humanities major in the body of a STEM major. And I still don't know a lot about the specifics of what I want to do with the bio degree, to be honest. Like one day I'm like, I want to study whales. The other day I'm like, I want to do genetics. And I thought this would change when I came to college, but it's just gotten worse. I could
Hmm.
do anything in bio. But for me, the baseline and why I knew that this was a good choice was because for a very long time, I don't see myself regretting taking bio because no matter where I end up within it, I think I'll be good. Like I'll have no regrets because it interests me to that degree. That's why I'm so confused about what to do within it. For writing, actually, that's the thing I was always sure about. Like bio was iffy relatively, but writing since I was maybe 6 years old, I was like, this is the one thing I know I can do,
Yeah.
and that I want to do. And it always just made me feel the most like myself. And I was like, it's just I never stopped like doing that in some form or the other since I was a kid, whether it was like writing stories or poems or writing a diary where seventh grade had the most drama and it was just the most dramatic stuff ever. And so I knew that as I grew older and I had to start thinking about these things more practically, I knew that no matter what I did, writing was always going to be something I also did.
Right.
Whether I integrated it into whatever else I was doing or kept pursuing it on the side, I knew that I wanted to do it. And the Hopkins writing program actually is really, really cool. I think
Mm,
it's one of the oldest writing programs in the country at the college level.
yeah,
And when I got there, since I've been at Hopkins, actually, the idea that I can pursue writing and that it's relevant to my life has just become more and more solidified, which is odd
right.
because it's such a STEM school.
Mm,
The main question for me was deciding between doing the major and the minor. I was open to either, but I think the major had way too many requirements and the minor was much easier. So it just balanced out to making more sense. And then with MSH, I had no idea that this major existed at all. Um, the easiest way to explain how I took this major is just I'll just tell you the story of how it happened. I was in
yes.
orientation week. It was about to get over, and they gave us a slip to sign up for different departments' open houses to go explore majors. I was like, I know what I want to do. I know I'm doing Mulsal, I know I'm doing writing. I'm cool. I have a third slot empty, and I need to attend something. And I was like, okay, this thing looks weirdly like something that's exactly what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll attend it on my third slot. And I kid you not, I went and sat in the first row. I was asleep for almost the entire orientation for this major. And the lady who was conducting it probably knew that I was asleep. But in the brief few moments that I was awake, I was like, okay, I'm liking this. This is making sense. So that was
Wow.
enough to convince me that I wanted to do it. And the way the major works is if you have a STEM thing that you're doing and you have a
Right.
humanities thing that you're doing, it ties it together really well. And all the classes that you have to do over and above that were things that were really interesting to me. Like a class I took called Rise of Modern Science this
Mhm.
semester. It's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. And I didn't know that it was actually happening at a level that I could pursue it. So this major just ended up being one of the best decisions I've taken, honestly, because the class was about the history of how modern science came about and how, like, viewing it through a lens of politics and society and how different wars and like who was in political power at the time, different international relations really influence what science gets favored at like national and global levels. It's so cool. So
Wow.
yeah, and then I met some people in the major at an event, and some of the stuff that they talked about, like career goals that they want to pursue, I was like, okay, this is something that could work really well for me. So it was a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually sounds perfect for you. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
that Jesus offers that and you found it and were, awake for the few moments that you were to land into this. uh, that's really awesome. And actually that, expands, I think, people's perception about JHU as well, because when people think
Mhm.
of JHU, they just think of it as like a bio STEM school, but actually it
Yeah.
has so much beyond that, right? And
Mhm.
and people really need to know and apply to it for more than bio.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming actually to our whole conversation about applying to JHU and deciding
Mhm.
on it as an early decision option, right? I like vividly remember the Zoom call that we
It's
had with
crazy.
you and your parents, and it was this whole debate about like, should we take
Oh
the
god.
risk to the Harvard REA, or should we just be realistic and apply to JHU?
Yeah, it was crazy.
And you actually had such a practical approach, and you were finally the vote that swung it, and you were like very sure and convinced, and you were like, let's just do the practical thing and apply to JHU. And in addition to that, I think you had one of the best why college essays I've ever
Oh,
read, in terms
no
of your
way.
research and just like your level of research and the depth that you went to, and again the writer in you that was able to connect this like seemingly unrelated story to your reasons for why you wanted to go to JHU. So tell everyone a little bit about your reasons for picking JHU and that essay.
Sure. When you say it, it sounds so much more coherent than it was because I remember just being like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. With the essay and with the decision, they were both incredibly chaotic processes. Also, the call that you're talking about, I wish we had recorded it because I appreciate so much how you say I was the vote that swung it. I distinctly remember that I was manipulated and it just happened to work out because I feel like at the end, you guys said, let's toss a coin and decide. And I was like, that's not going to work. I refuse to make a decision like that. And then the coin actually landed on Harvard. And then you guys were like, oh, that's so great. And you were all celebrating. And I was like, no, wait, this is not great. I want to do Hopkins. And I still try to convince people that that's a good way to make decisions, but nobody agrees with me. It just worked for me. I don't recommend that anybody else try it. I'm just more gullible than most people. So I remember early on in the whole when we were making our list of colleges to apply to, I was advocating very strongly for a lot of very unconventional schools. Now, this goes from like Georgetown and USC, which are like really good schools, but not the most obvious choices for bio. And then there was a point at the end in over the summer where I was like, I want to go to the University of Omaha because I want to. I've just decided.
Yeah.
So in retrospect, actually, I think this was my way of acknowledging that I wanted to do more than just bio, and this was also my process of like realistic goal setting. And I always wanted to explore something multidisciplinary, but it just sometimes it seemed really far fetched. And because I was so uncertain about all of it, I couldn't concretely make a decision based on that desire. Um, Hopkins was definitely one of the most obvious choices because I knew at least that bio would be a big part of the picture. And I think
Right.
the side effect that that had is that I always took Hopkins for granted. So if you remember, I had this document with, other than your very well put together spreadsheet, I appreciated the spreadsheet, but I made my own document, which was like terribly color coded and had a ridiculous name based on some meme.
Yeah.
And it had like a list of all the, like a tier list basically of all the places I was applying to. And Harvard and Hopkins were at the top, and then everything else was below that. And so I feel like I just didn't pay attention to them at all because I was like, yeah, those are the places that I'll just get rejected from and like move on. So I
Yeah.
never really paid attention to them because I feel like I didn't want to picture myself too aggressively at any of those places because I didn't want to be disappointed. But then when ED season was like coming up, then I had to be a lot more realistic and I had to think about these things in a way more real way. Um,
Right.
and you and my mom both were like, okay, now you need to start considering the Harvard Hopkins thing a lot more, and we need to pick one of these at least early on to apply to.
Right.
And then my mom actually convinced me to do a virtual tour of Hopkins, and that's when I absolutely fell in love with it. Specifically, I remember I saw the picture of like our Peabody Library, and I was like, okay, this is a very cool place, and it's a lot more than I imagined it to be.
Yeah.
And so then that's when I kind of was like, I'm on the same page in terms of vibes, which is again not a good way to decide what school you want to go to, but weirdly, it's a big part of it. It's like, what place do you vibe with?
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, fine, I can work with this. And then it became the whole Harvard versus Hopkins thing. And then we had the call, obviously, and of course there are the technical the differences between an RA and an ED, and how that would have played out. But I didn't wasn't applying to that many state schools, so the REA wouldn't have restricted me too much
Yep.
applying later on.
Yep.
Um, and then it just became, I think, a lot of the discussion we had was me trying to figure out why I was making the choice that I was making. So on one level, there's the point about how when you get accepted or rejected to a college, it's not very straightforward. It's not like these are the best schools, so like if you get rejected from those you can get accepted below, or if you get rejected from a place that you've ranked lower, then a place above that won't take you. There are people who got rejected from like 11 of their target or safety schools and then got into their dream school. So the whole idea of best fit, I think maybe it's not totally meaningless. um
Mhm.
so that was a factor for sure. And then I think Alicia told me that like when it comes down to it, going to Harvard versus Hopkins is not going to be that much of a difference in terms of the doors that opens for you or the opportunities you have or the experience you have there. And I think that was something I needed to hear too. And then I realized that while again, like going to Harvard, I just visited actually for the first time. Hopkins is better, but the reason that I was applying was maybe just because it was Harvard and not for any reason beyond that, which is a good reason to apply to Harvard. But I think there was a lot that went into it after that point where I was like, okay, am I doing this for the right reasons? I needed to balance like the rationality of it. I mean, of course there's the aspirational side, but also like the practicality, because so many people apply to Harvard with the same mindset that I did. It was like, I'll just get rejected and move on, just a rite of passage. that
Yep.
it that the tag of the Ivies and the tag of all these name schools that are really really popular and everyone wants to at least try, can cause some very real issues in terms of numbers. Like the year that I applied, so many people got rejected ED from Cornell because
Yeah.
everyone knows that Cornell is an Ivy and it's relatively easier to get into, and ED makes it much easier. So many people applied that it skewed everything. So I think I had to factor in all of that. And then at the end, I realized that, hey, it's not that much of a difference. And the reason I want to apply to Harvard isn't because I really genuinely like Harvard more than Hopkins, it's because it's Harvard.
Yeah.
And after that, it became pretty clear. And then
Yep.
coming to the essay, again, this happened purely accidentally. My focus in terms of essays in general was always to like twist the prompt into something unconventional, which is so obnoxious of me. But sometimes it did work. And I think with the Hopkins essay, it worked, thank God. Um, one of my major concerns, which I talked to you a lot about, was that if there are like thousands of people who have been given the same prompt, how am I supposed to write something memorable? I think that was what always was the question I asked myself when I was writing essays. So I always tried to, like, as cliche as it sounds, I tried to do something out of the box, and approach it in a way that would have whoever is reading it kind of do a double take, that, oh, it's
Yeah.
something different from all the
Yeah.
thousands of essays we've already read. Um, so with the Hopkins essay, I was procrastinating writing it because I knew what the stakes were and it was such a big deal. And then the way it came about was absolutely unhinged. There's a YouTuber I really like, who went to Hopkins, and I was in online school and I was totally watching YouTube instead. And he has this video about his favorite homemade ice cream recipes. And he also grew up in Baltimore and went to Hopkins. And then one of them was this ice cream that you only get at this place in Baltimore. And then I was like, okay, something is happening here. And
Yeah.
then I just went on this like Googling rabbit hole with absolutely no intentions to ever make something out of it. And then I found out that the ice cream place actually had a connection to Hopkins, and that Hopkins had them supply ice cream to to our dining halls. And then I was like, okay, fine, I need to do something about this now. And then I kind of tried to take the ice cream and make it a metaphor about making a weird flavor of something just because you want to do it. Because the most popular ice cream flavor at that place is something called honey graham, because the owner really liked graham crackers and he wanted to make an ice cream. Um, and then also about how sometimes when you really believe in something, even when it's really unconventional, then you will find other people who resonate with you. And then when people come together, then something good will come out of it. And I try to like say or imply that that's a place that, like, Hopkins is a place where that can happen. So I honestly did not plan that this would happen the way it did. I was very, very lucky that this just came to be. But I think the only credit I can take is I was like, okay, let me try to use this and make something
Right.
out of it, instead of just being like, oh, this is one more reason to apply to Hopkins. Is the
Yeah.
essay. Which is, it's
Yeah.
really good ice cream, by the way.
Yeah.
The first time I went and I tried it, I actually cried. And then some orientation person was there, and I was just sitting alone, and everyone else was sitting together, and I was eating the ice cream, and then I was crying, and I looked at her, and I was like, "This is what got me into this school." She was like, "Okay."
I was actually just going to ask you if you've been able to have this ice cream
I
or
have it
not.
every week. It's so good.
Oh, now I
All the
want
time.
some.
It's awesome.
I'm going to come visit you just so I can have this ice cream because it sounds
Finally, good. Sure.
yeah. So, as an extension of that and all of the activities and the resume you were able to have, you are quite involved on campus now, and you have been able to continue your passions at GHU as well. As someone who was really into debating and writing, you manage the social media for the Blue Jays and Poets Club. You're also at the GHU Premier Undergrad Poetry and Performance Club, right? So tell us a little bit about what drives you to participate so much on campus at GHU, and how many opportunities are you able to get for yourself, and how you go about navigating all of this.
Honestly, there's a lot less pressure at college in terms of extracurriculars and clubs, because when I was doing it at high school, it was very much something to add to my, I mean, of course I did things that I enjoyed. I never did anything that I didn't love, but it was also with the mindset of, I need to show that I can do many things, and I need to show my leadership qualities, and this is something that someone is going to evaluate. So there was kind of always that that axe hanging over me, and it added a lot of pressure. But in college, while it's nice to, I mean, do things, and of course they still count, and all these things are still valuable to like in the future and like adding to the kind of person you are, there's a lot less pressure, and there's a lot more things that you can explore that you might never have even heard of. um so in terms of that, it's way more chill, and you can just do things with way less stakes,
Mhm.
which is kind of freeing. And I think the key takeaway is to just try whatever, and without putting any pressure on yourself, which is something that you're allowed to do in college way more than high school, personally. But then the other thing is you have way less time in college. So you need to
Right.
kind of figure out that, okay, what is working out for me? For example, like I was very keen on debate before, but now it's something that I do a lot more casually at
Mhm.
Hopkins. Also because debate is so different in the US and in India that I don't know, my relationship with it changed a little bit, but it's still something that I'm interested in and want to keep
Right.
doing in whatever capacity. On the other hand, poetry, I didn't have as much of an avenue to explore it here. It was something just I mostly just did for myself. But there we have this really new club, and then everyone on the board is so nice. So I got involved with the board. It's just and obviously Baltimore has such a like an amazing arts and culture scene and a poetry
Mm.
scene and a writing scene. So it really you're really connected to the place that you're in. And I think my enjoyment of Baltimore and why I like it when a lot of people don't have a great attachment with Baltimore is because of the poetry club. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was about being open,
Right.
and like being okay with change and just exploring new things and starting fresh. And then there's also so many clubs at school and so many things you can try. Honestly, I haven't even scratched the surface of it because, and here's a caveat of that, or like the catch 22 there is that oftentimes there's so many opportunities and so many things you can try, and so many people around you are trying them, that you can feel a different kind of pressure, which is like, am I making the most of the place that I'm in?
Yeah.
And I think my mindset, which was difficult to do for me, but I was pretty firm about it from the beginning, was that I will try to take things slow and I will do things at a pace that works for me. So I got involved in one club at a time, kept my focus limited to one or two extracurriculars, didn't try to pressure myself to do a lot of the extra things I did beyond school in high school. And I was like, I will eventually, this is a great place and a platform where I can do these things in a whole new way and really like explore new horizons in all the things that I'm interested in. But I don't want to do it in a way that I am really making things difficult for myself and I
Right.
lose enjoyment in any of those things. So while a lot of people around me were already having on campus jobs or trying out for positions or getting involved in all these clubs, I was like, okay, I'm going to take things super slow.
Right.
um, I'll focus on school and making friends, which is honestly the toughest thing about college is just the people getting used to like being in a place way more than the academics was like making friends and like finding the right people for you. So I took it really slow and then I gradually increased my involvement. So next
Mhm.
semester, I'm hoping to explore a lot more extracurriculars and clubs and stuff, and maybe even start a club myself. So yeah, I mean, just
Yeah.
I think doing things with no pressure and no stakes,
Yeah.
and really having the opportunity to do things just because you enjoy them and they're
Yeah.
adding to your life on a day-to-day basis rather than with some great end goal, that's something really liberating if you use it the right way, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really sustainable process to adopt in terms of like how you go about choosing what you want to do and how much you take on at a time. Because it can get very intensive, right? Because JHU is a very intellectually rigorous and challenging environment. Especially as a
Yeah.
STEM student, you do have a lot of classes, labs. Your research projects going on, and being able to manage that with your own passions and pursuits outside of the classroom can get quite challenging, right? So,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. What is a typical day at JHU for you like?
Honestly, this is the most difficult question to answer because there is like no, like at home I had a routine and I value routine so much, and I do have a routine at Hopkins too, but it's very it's I see my time as weeks now because that's just the way your classes are structured and your different meetings are. And every single, like, so it changes semester to semester. In my first semester, depend, and also classes are at really random times. So there are some days where I just have one class in the evening, and some days where I have three in the beginning. So it just, your whole week balances out. But you're like, this day I'll do this homework. And this sounds so boring, but this day I'll do that homework. And sometimes you need to, at Hopkins, you need to spice up your life, which I'm very serious about, by deciding to do homework in a new place. So you're doing
Wow.
the same. Yeah, I'm like, I won't sit in this room. I'll sit in this other room and do my homework. So that's how I try to like vary what I'm doing. But
Wow.
other than that, it's like there's no fixed time where I eat. It just depends on me and 1,000 other people. I'm like, who's free to go eat now? Or is there anything good to eat now? So I think on a week on week basis, it's mostly just going to your classes and then planning out what papers you need to write or what homework you need to get done. And then I try to go out once a week to the Indian restaurant with my friends.
Right.
You cannot miss it. You can miss class, but you can't miss going out to eat Indian food on the weekend. And then, yeah, just trying to balance out, like seeing certain friends who you don't normally get to see, and whatever clubs you have that week or whatever other stuff you're working on. So a week is really more of a unit of time than a day. On a daily basis, it's just go to class, find your friends, or do whatever work you need to do that day. Sometimes I like to spend a lot of time outdoors, so sometimes I try to work outdoors.
Right.
And then sometimes I go to the gym. And then, yeah, just make sure you eat a couple of times, and then when it's 2 a.m. and you can't work anymore, I make myself a sandwich in the darkness of my room, and I watch YouTube till I fall asleep. It's very healthy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so boring. It's really boring.
Wait, how many hours in a day do you spend in the library?
I think I may have spent more time in the library than I do in my room. Because I also had a single, which was awesome, but I could not be alone. It's very first semester of college thing. I just could not stand to be alone. And also, like, while on the surface it sounds so boring, because I'm working, we're all, it's not, also because everyone around you is working pretty much all the time, you don't feel like you're that exhausted. I mean, you're exhausted, but you're all exhausted together. So it's a community thing. So it makes it really fun. So I'm rarely doing anything alone. I'm always, even group study is something which I never thought I would get into in school. But in college, it is the only thing I do. I cannot do anything alone. I have different friends in different classes to do things with. And I think that is a good way to go about college, like pro tip. But so with the fact that I'm always with people, it takes like the exhaustion and the dullness out of it. And I'm always simultaneously having a lot of fun and being very miserable. So it's a perfect balance, genuinely.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there's many highs and many lows, and that takes us perfectly into the next segment I have, which is called High Low Buffalo. Yeah. So what I want you to do is tell me something that's a high, something that's going well for you at JHU, something that's a low, something that's been bumming you out, and something that's Buffalo, that's random, funny, or interesting, and that you really appreciate about JHU.
Okay. So a high for me is when I went into college, like I thought when I was in high school that I was a person who has everything figured out. I was like, I know what I want to do and I just need to like work on it and I'll get there. But then very quickly that illusion fell apart because that goal setting ended where I got into college. And getting into college and going to college are very different things. So for me, I had to very quickly become okay with just trying new things. And being okay with the process of figuring out and exploring, and therefore actually ending up making much better and more well-reasoned choices about the kind of things that I wanted to invest my time and energy in, and where I see myself going with a lot of the things that I'm doing. So it's very much a process of trying, not going in blind, but like, hey, this is a class that I could take, which I feel like would work out well. This is a major that I think might work really well for me. And then being open to changing your mind, or taking a stop at halftime and being like, okay, here's where I go from here. And that, surprisingly, I adapted to pretty well, and that has been going very well for me. Again, it feels like a lot of it is just luck, but I took a bet with a major that I hadn't even heard of, and it's working out really great for me. Some of like I got involved with a club that was very new, and then I met some of the nicest people at school. Even a lot of the people that you end up being friends with, you're just constantly, there's a quote from my favorite book, which is like, sometimes you just have to jump and hope it's not a cliff. So that's very much the whole college process. And I think so where that's coming to is that
Mhm.
things that I thought I wanted to do, but I didn't fully know yet, or like goals I have or things I can explore that I
Yeah.
didn't think were feasible, or I didn't expect Hopkins to have as much of an avenue to explore those things as it really does.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are really going on well for me, because like the idea, like something I've always, or like for the past few years known that I want to do, is that I want to explore like intersections between like the creative space and the science space. And I want to approach science in kind of this unconventional, creative, humanity student kind of way. And then I found out at Hopkins that there's a history of science department and there's this rise of modern science class. And all my writing classes are so much fun, and I'm able to explore all this. And just finding out that this is something. And then, for example, there was this one event that I had to attend for my writing class, where I found a science writer and I got to have like a chat with her about what are the kind of ways that you can get into this field, what does your job look like, and just there's so much opportunity to learn about things you never knew, and some of
Right.
those are exactly what you needed to like have in your life. So just being able to realize that all my crazy ideas are actually very tangible things that I can pursue, and that Hopkins is actually weirdly a good place to do that. That's something that's a big high for me,
Yep.
for sure. And then a low, I don't know, honestly. I think it depends on your approach. Now, for me, obviously, Hopkins is an exhausting school to go to. There's a
Yep.
lot of work. There's a lot of academic pressure. And I think a lot of people expect it to be like a really competitive, kind of academically toxic place. And I
Yeah.
understand why one could think that, but weirdly, and I'm like totally not answering the right question, but I don't feel like it is like that. So while it is like sometimes really exhausting and sometimes you can feel the pressure, thankfully have not really had to deal with that head on too much. And
Yeah.
again, it's about like the kind of people that you're with, because it just is easier when you can tell that everyone is in the same boat. So
Yep.
that's on the academics front. But then, of course, going to a totally new place, and it's not even about it being a different country or like cultural differences. It's just like the experience of going to college, because I know people who were not that far from where they grew up who still
Yeah.
had to deal with that change. So it's very difficult being surrounded by people who have no idea who you are.
Right.
And for me, like that then it throws into sharp perspective how home is a place where people know you, and that gives you the space to kind of be more comfortable with yourself and not be so stressed out all the time about presenting yourself the right way or coming across the right way. I think that's
Right.
more of a difference than any cultural difference. So
Hmm.
that is a very difficult thing to adjust to. And I think it's a constant process of just allowing yourself to like be okay with people, and trusting people and giving them space, and stuff like that. That's very difficult when you're so surrounded by the same people all the time, and your old family and old friends are just not there. And so the people at college, you really rely on them in a different way than anyone
Yeah.
at home, which can be very difficult but also very rewarding when it works out. So that's a constant process, and that was something that at times was a big low,
Yeah.
but it's also like one of the greatest experiences of college.
Yeah.
And then something interesting or unconventional about Hopkins, something interesting definitely is how surprised I am by our humanities programs. Honestly, some of our humanities faculty and classes and some of the niches that those classes explore are things that I could not have imagined. And I feel like I'm really making the most of it there.
Right.
Um, so yeah, of course, our STEM is great. Everyone thinks and knows
Yeah.
that our STEM is great.
Yeah.
But for me, so far, also it's because all the STEM classes I've taken are all the really basic ones so far.
Yeah.
Maybe when I explore the upper level electives, and now that I'm exploring research and stuff, I will really get to find something that sparks my interest in STEM as well. But
Yeah.
our humanities faculty, classes, departments are so good. Also, that's something surprising that I didn't know about Hopkins and how interdisciplinary that you can be in what you do. And that ended up being like deep, like in perfect alignment with what I'm about. So yeah, I think that's something interesting. And yeah, the funny things we could like do a whole other episode, like people's rooms got infested with rats, and then one time a building got fire, and then there was a flood, and
Oh God.
there's a lot of weird stuff happening there. I could also do a whole episode about our dining hall, but I don't want to expose us
Yeah.
to.
What is with that? Is the food at JHU not that good?
Oh, see,
Because
it's a
I
very small school. Hopkins is you would be
Hmm.
surprised how small a school Hopkins is. Another thing that I really like about it, doesn't work for some people, works really well for me because I went to a tiny high school.
Yeah.
And it's nice to kind of run into the same people, more than once a month.
Yeah.
So it's a small school and we have very few dining halls. And honestly, it's not as bad as we like to say it is, but it gets very boring and it's very hit or miss. Like I've never had the same quality of pizza twice at FFC.
Wow.
Sometimes it's burnt, sometimes it's raw, and sometimes it's just right. So yeah, it's the food is
Yeah.
not one of our greatest selling points, but we have an Indian grocery store very close by, and it's literally my Disneyland. It's so good.
That's
It's awesome.
awesome. If anything, it'll just push you to become a cook and a great,
I'm
be.
trying. Yeah, I was at IKEA today, and I was like, I will cook. I will cook. Manifesting it for myself.
Yeah, you will be fine. But yeah, no, thank you for all of those honest and candid reflections.
Mhm.
But yeah, tell us a little bit more about Baltimore and Maryland in general. People feel very skeptical about
Yeah.
going to college there. So what's that been like?
A lot of people at Hopkins and apart from Hopkins really don't love the idea of Baltimore.
Mhm.
It gets a bad reputation. I understand people who think that going to school on the West Coast is more fun, or people who are studying in New York or Boston are like those are really fun cities and vibrant cities. But I think there are some Baltimore's called Charm City, and
Mm.
I really am on board with that branding. It is such a charming place because it has, I think, like very cliche again, but Inner Harbor is like one of the first places I went to, which is like the fun downtown waterfront place to go to in Baltimore. And I think that like captures it super well because it's such a nice blend of old and like new.
Mhm.
It's just such a blended, unique place. Um, and it's also a place that's seen a lot of really bad things and been through some really hard times. And I think the way I see it, and from my limited exposure, that ends up doing one good thing, which is like making a really strong community. So especially like the artistic community in Baltimore is they're so tied to their city from what I've because I went to like the City Literature Festival, which was amazing. And the poetry club we like explored we had an open mic or we attended a few open mics where I got to see performers from all over the city. And I think it builds a really strong community. All the ups and downs of like a place that's been through so much, it leads to some really like resilient and like creative people. And I think it's a very charming place, and the people are quite nice. And of course, there's the occasional crime here and there. My friends and I have this. We actually last semester had this fun thing where we get these alerts, whenever there's a crime. I've heard NYU, by the way, has these
Yeah.
alerts. My friend told me,
Yes.
which is like run, hide, or fight. What is with that? That's so creepy. Like
That's bizarre.
you should not tell anyone to fight armed robbers. But we have
Yeah.
a lot of armed robberies and we get these alerts for them. And I have like a tier list of my favorite ones. So I hope whoever was involved with these never sees this, because there was this one person who got put in a car, and then the robbers took the person to like 5 or 6 different ATMs, and they had them like withdraw money from all. I call
Oh
it the
my
ATM Tour de France. And then there was my other favorite one. There's this apartment building where a lot of Hopkins. I hope this gets cut out of the final edit. But there's this
God.
apartment building close to, like where a lot of Hopkins students live. It's called the Marylander, and there was this one guy who was just breaking into people's houses, and then as soon as they saw him, he would leave. So I call that one swiper no swiping because he didn't actually take anything. So yeah,
I
there's
love
crime. Yeah, there's things happen, but I think that people focus on that way too much. And there's a
Right.
lot of really nice places to see in Baltimore. There's a lot of really cool food. There's cool antique and thrift stores. There's a Goodwill very close to campus. I think you just need to like allow yourself to explore. And I feel like a lot of people don't explore that much or go to the more typical places. But for me, I went in with a totally blank slate, and I was like, okay. And while there are so many places that I'm just beginning to explore, I can like say that the area around campus, Charles Village, I have like a pretty good idea. I've tried a lot of cafes. I've been thrift shopping a bunch of times. I've like walked around the area around it. So I think, and the farmers market next to campus is so good. Best burritos ever. And then we have a place right behind campus called Hampton, which I just
Mhm.
recently went to weirdly. Beautiful neighborhood, so many places to eat. So I think I don't know, just dropping all your preconceived notions. And yeah, it's not like LA, it's not New York, but it's its own thing. And there are so many small things to appreciate about Baltimore. And I think so many things that you wouldn't like get in other places. There's this very cool art market we have. There's this record store that I want to go to. So just keeping yourself open and like exploring things that you wouldn't otherwise, because it
Right.
really forces you to like look, you know. And I think there's a value in that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah.
attached to Baltimore.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to make that, in all of these places, you can really find what works for you if you just have that open mind. And, like you said, sometimes when you leave home and a place where, everyone knows you and you've been a certain way, it actually gives you the space to completely redefine yourself and really just like go out and do things you may have never done before. And I think that's why college is such a great platform to do these things.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, thank you for opening all of our minds up to Baltimore. Now, 1 year into university, and to wrap up today, I'm sure you've had many moments of reflection as you've shared with us. So, can you share with everyone who's listening any advice on picking colleges on the entire application process?
Uh, that's a loaded question. I
Mm.
guess I would say, again, like your research, like of course do your research and consider everything that you can. But and this kind of beats the purpose, but I think it's very true. You're The things that we're looking for when we're applying to college and the things that we're considering are just a small part of your experience. Like I would not have known what my day-to-day would be like. I would not have known the kind of people that I would be surrounded with. I could try my best to make an estimation, but I wouldn't have known like Baltimore versus some other place. So all of these things really play into your day-to-day. And these are things that you cannot account for. So I guess doing your research and trying to learn a lot about like the place that it's in and the college itself and different programs that you're interested in. Sure, you can like make a lot of progress, especially in terms of academics, when you're like, oh, these are programs that are offered that work for me. But for me, like I could not have known so much about Hopkins
Hmm.
that I've experienced actually being there. So I guess that a lot of it is just that leap of faith thing that I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
Is that sure, you're not going in blind at all, but once you're actually there, surprising things will happen. And just trust that wherever you end up, there you will find things about that place or about your experience there that work for you. Or you can just transfer.
Yeah,
But
yeah. That's the
no,
beauty.
I think that, yeah, no, places are more than we can see on paper, and our experiences are a lot more than that. And I think every single place you can go to, especially if you do get accepted there, then like I said, there is some meaning to that.
Yep.
There's a chance that it's going to work out for you on that basis alone. But I don't know, just being open-minded. It's cliche, but it actually is very valid, and just allowing yourself to experience things. And then in terms of like you said, college is a place you can redefine yourself. But I would also say that while you're in a new place and you're in a totally new experience, the fact that you're surrounded by people who have no preconceived notions of you, you're starting on a clean slate. Sometimes that's really scary. So I would say like hold home close as well. Know
Yep.
who you are. You don't feel the pressure to suddenly become this like all of my friends who went to college had some of them were trying totally out there things what they wouldn't have done at home. Some of us were just the same person in a different place and being shaped, allowing ourselves to be shaped by our circumstances. So don't, at the same time, don't feel the pressure to like suddenly become different, and just remember like that you're still you.
Yep.
And that you as you are belong where you are, and that you can create a space for yourself, or like an accepting and welcoming space for yourself without being a different person, but also really allow yourself to make the most of whatever, wherever you are, and experience things that you wouldn't otherwise. That's basically the sum of it, I would say.
I love it. You are poignant as ever. And I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation today. And I'm so amazed to hear all of the things you're doing at JHU, and happy that it's been this amazing place that has allowed you to do all of these things. So thank you. Thank you for your time today, Mriganka. This has been amazing. And I'm sure everyone's
Yeah,
going to find it
fun.
really valuable.